Strange Magic, Episode 2. Has an interesting cover that makes me think of Native American and biblical themes. If you scry into a glossy surface, particularly with certain vibrations, you see auras around things. And it starts with the crystals themselves. Now, you don't have to have an expensive crystal collection. And what powers the rocks have are their physical properties. What beliefs that you're going to work with them, that's up to you. Now, certain forms of witchcraft, represented by, I guess the tradition that gets people to have these four-sided stones, that's more about that, and that happens to be approximately four-sided for more old grimoires, and this is sort of a crystal that is seasonal. But the Eve logo, you have this snake. And so Eve, or Hawa, was the first to fall under the temptation of the snake, which said the apple, in the, the usual interpretation of the biblical story. Now, the female are the person who identifies as a female or is acting that role or whatever, or if you don't really go into that side and, with the over gentrification of stuff, the person leading a lot of these magical rituals is actually behind the person. In Native American societies, the female will often be the one in front and the males, behind, behind in a way that they can see before, and, that they can look back and guard the trail that way. And you see the bird perched on the shoulders as a representation of the guidance of the spiritual. I tried to get the couple books that we have here, listed on this meme, which will show up in another couple sets of programs, right? Apocalypse Mundane and the Spiritual Approach to Emergent Technology. I tried to get it signed to my beloved consumer, but it got signed, so I'm pleased with that factor of it, which makes ordering from their Etsy store better with that. Our attention affects us. What we're exposed to, to bring it a more masculine view, we're going to look at how light and sound affects the cell. Well, I'm not going to go into that, but anyways, what we face and what we choose to face and what we choose to do with it, that has a rather constant effect on us. Artificial technology, well, there's been a lot artificial for hundreds of thousands of years at the very least. Maybe, tens, maybe, 11 million years ago, certainly artificial technology. We don't know what those symbols, that symbolic working in the metal did to people. Or perhaps we do. I need to do my own analysis, maybe by the book of the findings, you could say. But spellcasting doesn't have to be you worship the object. You worship the forces of nature themselves. You can certainly operate spiritual formulas in sort of a egregore sort of way. And everything is being kept track of more and more in other ways. You can't operate a long-range walkie-talkie without someone without multiple governments after you, right? And there's the mention of the divine feminine. I wouldn't say there's a divine masculine either. I thought part of the purpose of saying the spirit of uni was to get beyond this gender stuff and this over-gendification of these issues. And Slush Neuer, you know, has a operation, a money attracting thing, and sometimes you can use something that represents money and all that, but you know, certainly these stones could be reused, and perhaps there's artificial stuff in, and big surprise, it's glitter. And I'm not going to, you know, give the whole formula or the whole whatever, but some people would say to have this stuff face the moon, because the moon represents more of a cyclical sort of thing, because time's not all lineal. You don't have to have a feminine side to get that part. But so there's you know, the edible substances included in here, which obviously after you go through all these steps, and summertime Jewish style ritual of a petition or a regret or whatever, that sort of thing that you put with it. Well, they would add water. I don't see any mention of water here. But you have a symbol of opening in an herb, and in another herb, you could say, or spice, maybe that be counted as a spice. Another couple herbs. One would be awakening more, I guess, and another would be soothing. So you don't just want to get wealth, you want to have, and you can dedicate this to whatever entity, you know, through whichever entities you wish, obviously. Now you see Teresa Bear, and has two pictures. Is it the same person? I think it's the same person, yeah. Of a stereotypical witch costume. Now, you know, I'm not going to say witch has anything to do with just not being Christian or not being Jewish. It's very specific terms that the polytheist would have used too. Now, I don't, you know, if we see in the meme here that I've altered, you know, we're she and her and Satanist and witch. I'm not sure how Unicole is, or any of these others are differentiating any of these. But the broom, there would be ointments that would be applied with the broom. The pointed hat, the pointed hat was a thing of recording information, usually astronomical. Tyler Power makes some predictions about artificiality and certain approval of the FDA. I don't see, you know, the Franklin Delano Roosevelt already told us about the FDA, so we don't need to think that things are necessarily safer or not. Probably safer, but sometimes they're not as safe. So, you know, but whatever. The technology, the media will be more immersive and all that, but we'll still have our own choice of what to do with it. We'll still have our mind, we'll still have our ability to connect in one way versus another, or not per se at all. But certainly what we're exposed to is going to affect us. Consciousness is not what we're paying attention to, more the thing that lies between, and whether high vibrations or low vibrations, whatever volume or subject or whatever, you can approach it all with sort of the same consciousness, which the issue of tattoos, I would say that tattoos and a lot of role playing is, it has a mystical quality, but a higher mystical quality is to go beyond the outer forms and project, or to shift about. So some stuff not being as permanent as it used to, and yet maybe even being firmer than it used to is an important thing. Unicole Unicron doesn't seem to go the egregor route when talking about the technology going about. And certainly after, starting 2009 and going onwards, there was a process of falling under certain propaganda about wanting to feel oppressed and offended, and this sort of built itself up into a pretend enemy where they were trying to, but it's really just the same elite families that really don't have and even suppress traditional religious values, traditional patriarchy, that are actually the ones causing some of these issues. Yeah, there's a lot of fear about what technology will do to us, but it's more what the humans programming this stuff are doing. Unicole Unicron has talked an awful lot about, doing stuff to feed the AI, but then again, letting the AI vampirize off you is probably not the best thing, is it? But okay, that's sort of beside the point. But I would definitely side with right-wing values of equality and perhaps charity if people have needs, and patriarchal values of valuing the difference between the individuals in society. Acknowledging different performances and different inherent features. Again, this overgeneralization of stuff is, that's as said here, pre-programmed constraints. And what we're finding is the people at the bottom, particularly since the movement that started in 2013, or the movement that was taken over by the same former Hitler Youth billionaire in 2015, it gets us at the bottom in particular fighting, because that Occupy Wall Street and all that stuff was not, that was getting too strong. So they had to come up with this thing. And if you look at how wages and stuff work, if you're going to look at amount of work done, apply, type of work done, asking for overtime, I mean, amount both in the act itself and the time spent, and if you ask for a wage or not. Females earn more than males, and you can take that in the West. And some societies, it's purely meritocracy. The stronger patriarchy you have, the more meritocracy, the stronger that meritocracy tends to be. And also, you look at the females in the West get they have more sick time, more higher medical cost, pregnancy leave, stuff like that is factored in. And they also tend to don't they retire earlier? So there are factors. It's more about fairness. There's the real issue isn't this gender or race thing. It's not about identity politics. If you look at the statistics, what you find is a greater and greater stratification, particularly over the past year, of how much the owners make versus the employees. So if there were better fair wage laws, like in certain patriarchal societies, then, individuals would be able to take care of their family. You wouldn't have to have 2-3 people working. And this war of the sex, the war of the sexes, the female male supremacy contest or whatever. Well, okay, whoever's supreme in one area or another, that's whatever. But this prejudicial thing, it's really a brainwash from the top. And that's true. Corporate control, greater government control, again, left-wing values, but then again, calling for communism. So it's not quite on the same side of that. So when we say that Unicole Unicron is left-wing and some other stuff, we're not saying certain things, because certainly breaking free from the general corporate thing is part of the spirit in Unicult, and that I definitely honor that aspect. And competition doesn't mean that everybody loses. Competition means that everybody loses when abuse happens, because when you go into abuse and you violate the rights of others, then you end up, you really hurt yourself. And I've some people are hurt more physically or however, but I see it. I've seen it in perpetrators of various sorts, that nobody has to have any jailhouse or vigilante justice, or it's not really jailhouse justice. It's just a bunch of predators attacking each other. That has nothing to do. It's not how people think. Because honestly, if somebody was supplying contraband or something like that, they would, no matter what their offense is, they're going to get their position. But it's not about instigating. Definitely want to. And since 1968, if you're not white, if you're not male, you tend to have privilege. If you look at the, because particularly since we're dealing with immigrants, the Black people, I mean, not the mulattoes, not the casties, the mesties, and that sort of, well, I mean, if their parents were immigrants or they were immigrants, then you're going to find that a lot of this stuff is, they have lower crime rates. They have, they earn more, and they tend to have a better sense of well-being, you could say. But just because you're born white doesn't mean you have to suffer about, not being as supremely situated as the stereotype is, suffering is something that, is a choice. It's not the difficulty, it's how you judge on top of that. And if everybody's operating according to their means and having their basic needs met, then there's no reason that they can't have a joy and love and a spiritual awareness that permeates these things. And spiritual awareness doesn't require great wealth or anything like that. It actually tends away from that. But so this talk about patriarchy, matriarchy is, yeah, so Hannah Keene is what we end this with. And it's art. And you're questioning, is this more genius or crazy or what is it? And it depends on what you're doing with it. There's some rhyme, there's some broken piece of a 1312. I guess that's where I don't know, Romans, is that a quote from, is that a partial quote from Romans? We have, I'm not sure how the numbers break down, because yeah, we have 9 and then we skip, they have 21 and then 10 and sign 107 and revisit 107. And okay, is this sort of a ritual that you respond to and fill in the blanks that prepares you for death, and you realize that you were playing a role in life? You're taking account of certain things, you're thinking of how to make things, or what you're going to do, your plan. There's an ad lib thing, and I guess you're responding to the masculine. There's actuality and there's perceived. It's interesting nonetheless. And yeah, I don't mean for my language to sound too harsh or something. I'm just saying that some of the terms are triggering, you could say, and they're triggering because of their general meaning or whatever. I would just say, like, yeah, what is the difference, Satanist and witch to Unicole? And some of this is an exaggeration. So you made a video. I'm talking about the meme now. So you made a video where you're seen naked, but are you prostituting? No. So horror doesn't really fit. And you've also said in videos that you don't want to be as promiscuous as some people might want you to be. But we see there the sort of a tantric, or, well, yoga has its stuff too, like that, is sacred sex or something. So yeah, in this modern society full of all this flash and awe and new things comparatively, it's time to direct your mythological thinking and to, not be afraid of what might be called the feminine side, but biologically we only have 2 genders. There's certain identities that people can go around with, Z and Zer, and what was Ghosty invented a gender. So I don't know what they call that. People say there are hundreds of them, and there are 78 new terms that they want you to learn rather than the pronouns that refer to the biological reality. So, yeah, I don't, the whole thing gets confusing, but we live a confusing life, and I think the point is trying to figure out how to operate it and trying to figure out what some people might have to say that we might not otherwise hear from.